Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to go over the coaching news in Bengals land. We've had some new coaches added to this coaching roster. And then we're going to do an offensive free agent preview. Free agency is just around the corner. It's like 3 weeks away, Jay. We've got the franchise tag open window coming up and the deadline right after that, and then free agency. So we want to get into who the Bengals could sign. They've got a lot of cap space. They've got a lot of moves they can make. So we're going to do the offense next week. We'll get into the defense next week and just kind of look at who outside the Bengals roster, who they could add to this lineup going forward. To finish up, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. I was at the Super Bowl this past week. It was a once in a lifetime experience for me, life-changing experience. Probably hard for some Bengals fans to watch Patrick Mahomes out there win another Super Bowl and make it mini dynasty and maybe going for a three-peat next year. We will get into that and how the Bengals can maybe defeat Patrick Mahomes at some point down the line. But first, Jay, let's talk about this coaching news. We've got 5 coaches in the past week or so added into new roles. We've got Brad Cragthorpe, who was promoted from assistant coach to quarterback coach, taking over for Dan Pitcher, who went to offensive coordinator. Freddie Knighton, who was an offensive assistant, was promoted up to assistant quarterbacks coach. Justin Riscati, an interesting new addition as passing game coordinator, comes over from the Vikings. He was the assistant offensive line coach. Jordan Kovacs on defense, promoted from assistant linebackers coach to safeties coach, replacing Robert Livingston. And then Jordan Salkin, a University of Oregon offensive analyst, as an offensive assistant coach. I know I just rattled off a ton of names there, Jay, and so it's a lot of new guys and new faces and guys who have been here in new places. Any kind of takeaways from these kind of new additions? It's just interesting. I think that they're getting new voices in the room. I don't know if it says anything about what changes the Bengals are going to make, but it is interesting that we have some new voices on the staff.
Yeah, new voices and a new position. The passing game coordinator position is a new one for Justin Riscati. And if they fill the assistant linebackers coach job that Kovacs left, they will have the biggest coaching staff in franchise history. They've had it every year since Zach's been here. That was one of the big changes where he lobbied for some more positions. Mike Brown in the front office agreed. They boosted up the coaching staff. And it's kind of what we've seen in the past. They really do kind of lean into that continuity aspect and the promotion, and they hire these young, bright guys. I know there's not a real connection with Jordan Salkin, but I think they view him as someone really bright with a good future. So get him in on the ground level, let him work his way up. I don't think Dan Pitcher is going to be here long as the offensive coordinator. So the more guys you can get in the pipeline below them and kind of keep that continuity running is a good thing. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't know who would be the passing game coordinator in the past. If it was something that Brian just kind of took on and they just didn't put a title on it. But now with him gone to Tennessee and they officially create this position and bring Justin in. So I think it's a good mix of new voices, like you said, but then also of the continuity and promotion for guys that have been here for a while and have earned these spots.
Yeah, it's a good point what you said about Dan Pitcher. It's like, look at all the interest he got just as an offensive coordinator candidate this year. And if the Bengals have a really good offensive season this year, as we have no reason to doubt that they won't, he'll absolutely be on the head coaching circuit next year. And that's a really good point, I think, is you want to have this stable of coaches. We talked about it when Pitcher was interviewing, when Callahan was interviewing, that it's good to have a staff where you have a lot of guys getting promoted and getting interest. Sure, it's going to make things hard down the line when you start losing these talented guys, but you'd rather have that than a staff that is totally stagnant and that guys are not wanting to look for and strive for those higher jobs and get new experiences. So I think it's great. And the idea of adding these new voices, I don't think it's going to all of a sudden change what the Bengals are doing on offense because they hire an offensive analyst, but it's always good to identify new ideas that are out there, whether it's from college football. We've seen Andy Reid talk about searching down to the high school level for new offensive ideas, right? Mm-hmm. The Bengals are always willing to explore those new ideas. We'll just have to see kind of how they implement them. They've been willing to change things in season, off season. That's not a concern. So the idea that they're willing to even explore these ideas, I don't think is that surprising. Let's go ahead and talk about free agency, Jay. So it's, like I said, it's about 3 weeks until free agency opens. I just wrote our top 100 free agents list for PFN this week. Please go read that. It's got all the best free agents who are going to hit the market. I believe, Jay, I put 5 Bengals on there, I want to say.
You did, yes.
On the top 100. So the Bengals have about $60 million in cap space going in the next season, which is top five in the NFL. We think 20, 21, 22 million of that's going to be going to T. Higgins on the franchise tag. We're assuming that. We know the Bengals are always going to keep a little extra in reserves for draft picks and injuries and stuff that comes up later in the season. We know that, but they should have money to spend. So today we're going to talk about the offense, Jay, and just go by position and see who are some of the free agents out there on the open market next month who could be a fit here. So let's just start at quarterback, which I think is probably the easiest position of all these of where the Bengals are going to go. Obviously, they have Joe Burrow as a starter. Jake Browning is locked in as the backup after his really, I'd say, excellent performance down the stretch. AJ McCarron was just released by the Bengals today, so he is no longer on this roster. Jay, do you think the Bengals are they going to sign somebody like a free agent, or is this they're just thinking maybe a developmental draft pick? What are you thinking at quarterback? Is this an area they're even going to think about this offseason?
Yeah, not this offseason. I wouldn't think, unless, you're talking draft, maybe a late round pick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't do it last year, and they had questions about Simeon and Browning. They've got an extra draft pick or two extra draft picks than what they had last year, but I think more than likely it's either a street guy, a street veteran right before camp, or they sign someone in undrafted free agency right after the draft. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine them spending money here coming up when the new league year starts to go find a third string quarterback. I mean, Browning was more than they ever could have expected.
Yeah.
Full expectations are that Joe Burrow is going to be 100%. That is position group 11 out of 11 of their concerns right now.
Yeah, and I think like you want Jake Browning to get as many reps during training camp in the preseason as he possibly can. Like he already got all the valuable in-game reps, but why not get him even more?
Right.
I think there were two guys that stood out to me as potential free agents who, like you said, that this was not going to be guaranteed money or anything like that. Like maybe as camp approaches, Brandon Allen is a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
He's been here in the past. He didn't really get to play at all in San Francisco. He's probably going to come look for a non-guaranteed deal. He's a guy that knows the system. Maybe he's an option. One other guy is John Wolford, who used to play for the Rams for a long time. He knows the McVay offense. He was in Tampa Bay this past season playing in a similar offensive structure. A guy that should be able to come in and like play this offense if they needed an arm. Those are just like two guys I think that could fit if they needed a guy who could literally just stand there and throw a ball. But I don't think they'll really be like part of the team going forward. Running back, I think, is way more interesting.
Yes.
So Joe Mixon, we don't know what's going to happen with him. I think you and I are both of the kind of on the same page that he's unlikely to be part of this team next year. I think his cap hit is, what's his cap hit? $8.5 million. They can save 5.75 by cutting him. I don't see him taking another pay cut. I just think they'll move on. Travion Williams, also a free agent. So that leaves Chase Brown and Chris Evans here on the roster. Interesting running back market, Jay. A lot of guys available. You got Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, all of whom were franchised last year. Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift. I don't see any of those guys being fits with the Bengals. I just really don't. Mm-hmm. I think that the Bengals are looking at Chase Brown to be, if not their 1A, then at least their 1B, or at least part of a thunder and lightning kind of combination backfield. I don't see the Bengals spending that type of money on a running back. There are other guys, I think, a little further down the line that could be a fit. But what about you, Jay? I don't see them Bengals going out and signing one of these high-profile guys. Do you disagree?
No, I agree with you. I do think they'll find a way to bring Travion back. I think they like him. He's been here forever. And he's not going to cost a lot. I can't imagine he's going to get a lot of looks elsewhere. Chris Evans, I think, might be done here. He's just never been what they wanted. The interesting thing is, I keep seeing Josh Jacobs. People, Bengals fans wanting him to go get him. It is insane. That is his market value on SpotRack, 4 years, $40 million. I mean, that's what they gave Mixon at age 23, 4 years, $48 million. Mixon had 693 carries at that time. Josh Jacobs has 1,305 carries right now. He's 26. Mixon's only 27. They're the same guy. Jacobs averaged 3.5 yards per carry this year. Not explosive at all. That's what they're looking for, is explosion. Yeah. Jacobs had 233 carries this year. He had 9 carries for 10 yards or more. There was only a couple guys that had at least 100 carries that had that few of explosive. It makes no sense whatsoever financially, production wise. So anybody that's out there touting for the Josh Jacobs signing,
Yeah.
it's not happening, and it makes no sense. I think that the one you circle and highlighter is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's almost 25, so he's still young. He's only got 441 carries on his body. He played with Joe Burrow at LSU. There's that connection there. It's not really a contrast with Chase Brown, but just having two guys back there that can do it. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has played a lot of third downs in this league. And he may not be the best blocking back in the league, but he's familiar with it. He knows how to pick up blitzes, pick up pressure, even though Mahomes doesn't get blitzed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would be the ideal one. He's not going to cost a lot. And last year, he averaged 11.1 yards per reception. That is the most out of all running backs last year. And, number 6 on that list was old friend Samaje Perine. He's another. He's not technically a free agent, but if the Broncos move on for him salary cut wise, he could be a guy that the Bengals go after in free agency as well. But I think of all the guys out there, I like the Cam Akers, bring him in. He's still just 24. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body, only 398 career attempts. Just bringing in a veteran like that you can ride for a year or two and then kind of keep replenishing that position through the draft. But I thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire was going to be a possibility last year. He felt like he might be a cap cut with the way Pacheco came on, and they had Jerick McKinnon, and Kansas City held on to him for one more year. But now he's a true free agent, and I would not be surprised at all to see the Bengals go get him.
He was definitely on my list. I mean, I think they have to consider him. Just the relationship with Burrow, I think it's a no doubter. And like you said, he'll be cheap. I can't imagine he'll have much of a market. I had some other guys on my list. Okay, I'm gonna throw this one out there. I don't think it's gonna happen, but like Derrick Henry, could it possibly be a fit? I don't know. On a short term deal, 2 years maybe. I think he could be a good contrast with Chase Brown. I don't think it's gonna happen.
No.
Here's the one that I really think would be a good fit though. In addition to CEH, Zach Moss from the Colts. I think Zach Moss did a really good job when Jonathan Taylor was hurt. If you look at the metrics, like yards after contact, he was top 5 during the time that Jonathan Taylor was out with his contract and injury situation. I think he's been really good, and he's a good pass blocker. He's shown he can be a good pass catcher. Shouldn't be that expensive, I don't think, especially given all these other options. I think he'd be relatively cheap. A couple other guys I thought Deontay Foreman, who's just been like kind of a bulldozer wherever he's gone. I think he could be a good complement to Chase Brown. Rico Dowdle, who didn't get a lot of run behind Tony Pollard last year, but he's been a good kind of bruising back for the Cowboys over the years. I think you got to mention Ezekiel Elliott just because he was just a little bit kind of tied to the Bengals last year. Maybe that was just him tying himself to a potential Bengals addition, but I don't know. I think as a short yardage back, he could be interesting. And the last one I'll throw out purely as a speculative 1-year prove it deal type of ad is J.K. Dobbins. This guy has been highly effective when he can stay on the field. Now, that's huge qualifier because he's missed so many games over his career. I mean, he cannot stay healthy at all. I can't imagine he's going to get any guaranteed money this offseason. If he wants to stay in the division, if he wants to come play on a team that's going to be competitive, I think that could be a possibility. I wouldn't have anything banking on J.K. Dobbins staying healthy or anything like that, but as a pure upside play, I think the Bengals could be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And they love their Buckeyes. But I had 2 other ones on the list. Antonio Gibson, possibly a 1-year, $3 or $4 million. He's going to be 26 in June, so he doesn't have a lot. And then I was a huge fan of Devin Singletary when he came out. The Bills just never used him, and he had a pretty good year this year with Houston. He's not a great pass blocker. He is explosive, but he didn't get a lot of carries, but he did have a lot of explosive runs. So a lot of it's just going to come down to the fit, finance wise. And I do the Derrick Henry one. I think they're going to be really leery of anybody up in that age range. I think they're going to look younger. The running backs just fall off the cliff so much faster than everybody else.
I agree. I'm not saying they should do it or even want to do it, but I like the idea of it is interesting. The only other name I had was, and I don't actually think this guy is very good, but like AJ Dillon from the Packers, kind of
Mhm.
like a pounder, a bruiser. I'm not sure that he's actually a very good football player, but maybe as a compliment to Chase Brown could be interesting. I think they'll be able to find somebody who's affordable because look at all the names we just mentioned. I mean, there aren't that many open running back spots around the NFL. We've seen how these past few off seasons have not been kind to free agent running backs.
Mhm.
I think at least one, two, three of these guys are going to have to take like a 1 year, $2 or $3 million deal. I really do, and that's going to be right within the Bengals price range. So I would be very surprised if they don't add like one of the guys we just mentioned. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wide receiver. So we talked about T. Higgins. We think that he is going to be franchised. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't think there's any doubt about that at this point. Tyler Boyd's a free agent. Trenton Irwin is a free agent. So that leaves Jamar Chase, Yoshivas, and Charlie Jones on the roster. This is an interesting one to me. If you've got T. Higgins and you've got Jamar Chase, you've got one of the best starting points from wide receiver in the entire NFL. So I don't know. Are you relying on those younger guys that you drafted last year to take another role, to take another step forward and get a bigger role? Are you drafting more guys in this upcoming draft? Are you trying to sign a free agent to maybe replace a Tyler Boyd in the slot? I don't know. I feel like this section of the roster is a little bit more wide open than most people might think.
I mean, I think it makes all the sense in the world to bring Ti back. He can play
Mhm.
inside, he can play outside. I think Yoshivas, he didn't play maybe as much as we thought he would last year, but he was really starting to come on. I think he could easily be your three next year
Yeah.
on the outside. I'm not so sure about Charlie Jones. I'm not that I'm down on him. We just didn't see enough of him. He had that
Yeah.
thumb injury in week 3. He didn't come back till later, and they just never really used him much in the passing game. So that's why they drafted him. It was to be the heir apparent to Tyler Boyd. But I still think if they're gonna get a guy in free agency, and I'm not sure they will, because I fully, even knowing that Higgins is going to be here, I still think they draft someone,
Mhm.
maybe not as early as they did with T, that first pick in the second round, but there's talent to be had out there, and
Oh, yeah.
they've shown. I mean, Troy Walters, terrific wide receivers coach. They can develop guys. But I think if they do anything in free agency, I think it'll be a slot receiver and someone just to kind of hedge that bet on Charlie Jones. Like they like him, they're high on him, but you still don't know. He's a fourth round
Yeah.
pick last year with no real track record. So I think if they do dip into the free agent waters, that's where it would probably be, as someone that can be a slot receiver and share time or kind of help bring Charlie along.
You got a name? You have a good name? You have any good names in free agency you think could be a fit?
I do. I like Paris Campbell.
Okay.
He's coming off a down year. The market value on Spot Rack is 1 year, 3.5 million. He's only 1 year removed from a season, 63 catches, 623 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those numbers are almost identical to what Tyler Boyd did this year in this offense. Doesn't drop the ball. He's only got 7 for his career, which started in 2019. He's played 75% of his snaps in the slot. I just think he is a guy that kind of could be that 1 year bridge where if Charlie needs a little more time, that Paris Campbell could be a guy that they could lean on in the slot. And then one other name who's on the tip of everybody's tongue right now is Mecole Hardman. I mean, he walked away from the Chiefs last year, and then he came right back. Things didn't work
Right.
out in the Jets. Now he's got 2 rings. Now he can go, pursue more money or other opportunities where he's going to get more chances to play. He's played 60% of his snaps in the slot. Last year, that was a career high. He'd been more of an outside, inside kind of guy. They used him in the slot more last year than he's ever been used in there. And I think I think he could be had for cheap. And I think he would be a guy that you could bring in here. And, it's never a bad thing to pull guys off of a Super Bowl championship team.
No, and I think how many times have we seen Hardman used on like jet sweeps and end
Yeah.
arounds and stuff that I think that the Bengals would like to maybe add to their offense a little more. That we've seen Jamar Chase do some of that stuff, but we've talked about it. Even though he runs like a running back, like those plays are not really his strength. Like I
Mhm.
think we could see Hardman used on some. Now Hardman did have some back breaking mistakes during the regular season too, I will say. So like
And the
I'd be
playoffs.
concerned about in the playoffs, yeah. So I'd be concerned about that, but. So my guys were like kind of in the same kind of realm. So Quez Watkins from the Eagles, he's also
There you
been
go.
like a slot player. he plays in between Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, so he'd be very comfortable, I think, playing between two more superstars in Chase and Higgins. Kind of lost his role to Olamide Zaccheaus with the Eagles this year in the slot, but still a player I think the Bengals could consider. Van Jefferson from the Rams, and then traded to the Falcons, someone who Zach Taylor worked with a little bit in LA, or at least would know the LA Rams offense, the McVay offense. And then I think a couple guys that could maybe be useful on special teams in addition to playing a wide receiver role. Devin Duvernay from the Ravens, who's always been a good return man and a good
Elite.
elite and a good wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type. And then a little lower profile of a name, Amir Smith-Marset, who was mostly with the Panthers last year or this past season. Good return man in college, decently return man in the NFL. Hasn't gotten much run as an actual receiver, but had a lot of fans when he was coming out in the draft. I think he could be an option. One more wide receiver option. Again, I wouldn't put this in the J.K. Dobbins realm, but like this is purely an upside play. Chase Claypool. I'm still intrigued by the guy's measurables, by his double-digit touchdown rookie season. I mean, there's a lot to like there. There's a lot to not like there, obviously, too. But the speed, the size, I mean, physically, he's got everything you want. Maybe if he came to a team with the Bengals with a lot of established veterans and a good culture, maybe he could finally get his head on straight. Maybe the Bengals wouldn't want to take a chance on that. I don't know. But he stuck out to me when I was looking at the free agent wide receivers as someone who could do something if he got his head on straight.
Hey, the two other names in the slot realm that are further down the list. Brandon Powell from Minnesota had a career year for the Vikings this year. He's only going to cost you $1 million or $2 million to stick in there. He's been with 4 teams over 6 years, but the Justin Rascati connection, he was with Brandon in Minnesota. So he averaged 11.2 yards per catch last year out of the slot, which was one of the best numbers. So I like him. And then Braxton Berrios, like you said, a guy that's got return ability too. If Charlie's going to be counted on more in that slot role and on offense, they're going to have to find a new punt returner. I think they're still trying to settle on a kick returner. Braxton Berrios was the number 10 punt returner in the league last year and the number 10 kickoff returner. He's only 28 years old. So I think those would both be cheap options to put in the slot, either as a starter or a backup, depending on how fast Charlie comes along.
And that Minnesota connection too is interesting because KJ Osborne's also a free agent. Now I don't know. I think he might be like a little more expensive than what the Bengals want to pay. Like he's been a pretty decent wide receiver 3 during his time in Minnesota. I would think he'd get a 1 or 2 year contract, maybe at a level that the Bengals aren't comfortable paying. Whereas some of these other guys that we've talked about are probably going to be closer to the league minimum. But another guy, if his price falls, I think Osborne could be maybe on the radar as a third option. But a lot of interesting options, obviously, at wide receiver. And they're, if T gets taken off the market, I think Michael Pittman from the Colts is probably also either going to get franchised or get extended. Mike Evans down in Tampa, same thing. I mean, it's how it happens every year. You look at the top of these positional groups and you think, oh, there's a lot of good guys, but the franchise tag is just going to end up wiping away the entire crop. And, Calvin Ridley or somebody's going to end up being the top wide receiver available. I feel like that's how it happens every year. Let's move on to tight end. So obviously all 4 of the Bengals tight ends are free agents. Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, Mitchell Wilcox, Irv Smith Jr., all of them. So they're going to have to work through who they want to bring back at what price. Externally, there's not a lot out there, Jay. There's basically one guy who's kind of the above all clear-cut number 1 tight end in free agency. And then there's a lot of similar guys who, aren't really that different from what the Bengals already are kind of running out there. I don't know. Is there anybody out there who kind of stood out to you, Jay, who you think besides these internal options who the Bengals might be interested in?
Yeah, the clear cut, I'm sure you're talking about Dalton Schultz. I just think he's the prize. I mean, the Bengals showed last year how much they value the position right now. It's not very high. But I do think there's guys out there. I've been a Mike Gesicki fan since he was at Penn State, being a Buckeye fan myself and just watching him just moss people right and left. He's a 6'6", red zone weapon. He was on a 1-year, $4.5 million deal last year with the Patriots. PFF had him as the number 8 best blocking tight end in the league. He can do both. He can be a pass catching weapon. He can block well. He split time with Hunter Henry. I got Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki both. I think either one of those guys would be great to bring in here a veteran presence. You know, Hunter Henry is his he's just got these unbelievably ridiculous consistent numbers throughout his career.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you know exactly what you're getting with that guy. There's no highs and lows. Last year, 42 catches, 419 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he was in a platoon with Gesicki. And those guys put up pretty decent numbers last year with Mac Jones throwing to him. Bring him in here. Let him be a part of a Joe Burrow offense. I think they can really produce and put up numbers like CJ did, like Hayden Hurst did a couple years ago. And I don't think either one of those guys is going to cost a whole lot of money. Hunter Henry made $8 million last year. I don't think the Bengals are going to play that, but he is getting older. Maybe he signs for less this year, but both of those guys I think would be good fits. And then Noah Fant,
yep,
I think he would be another one that would be right there. He averaged 12.9 per catch last year. Only 2 tight ends averaged more than that. That was Kittle and Isaiah Likely among tight ends with at least 30 catches. He only had 1 drop, which was 3rd in the league behind Tucker Kraft and Pat Freiermuth. Those guys didn't drop any. And he was 13th in blocking by PFF. So he can do both as well. And he's not a guy that's going to cost you a whole lot of money. He just finished a 4-year, $12 million deal. So that's $3 million AAV. Bring him in for 1 year, $3 million, two for $5, whatever it is. I think all of those guys could really help out. I expect him to draft somebody. I expect him to bring Sample back and Tanner Hudson and maybe Wilcox. But I still think it would behoove them to do what they did last year, where make sure you go get a veteran somewhere, but just don't
yeah.
go as cheap as you did with Irv Smith and as late as you did. The free agency was basically over by the time they signed Irv Smith.
Yeah, I think Noah Fant is a really good option because in Seattle he kind of ran that Rams style offense. Shane
Mm-hmm.
Waldron was their offensive coordinator. He came from the Rams just like Zach Taylor did. So I think it's a familiar offense for him. Former first round pick. Colby Parkinson is another guy who was also playing in Seattle. Seattle had 3 tight ends they used kind of on a loop. Colby Parkinson is also a free agent. I think he could be a fit. I had the New England guys as well. I think Mike Gesicki, if you're not going to re-sign Tyler Boyd, if you're not going to bring in a veteran slot receiver, Mike Gesicki could be your veteran slot receiver, honestly. That's what he did in Miami. He was very productive. He didn't really fit with the McDaniels system as much, but I think he could be a good fit here. Hunter Henry's a guy, like you said, always been more than consistent. A couple guys I had, I think, are a little more off the radar. Both from the Eagles. Jack Stoll, who's always been kind of a backup blocker type guy. I think he'd be very similar to like a Drew Sample if for some reason they can't re-sign Drew Sample. And then Albert O, I'm not even going to try and say his last name. He played for the Broncos, traded to the Eagles.
Yeah.
Flashed earlier in his career, has kind of been sidelined since. I'd be interested in taking a flyer on him. And then if the Bengals do want to get just a 3-down veteran guy like an Uzama, like a Hayden Hurst, I think Gerald Everett from the Chargers could be that guy. He's been pretty consistent over the years playing for Seattle, and he played for the Rams, so he's probably familiar with this offense they run in Cincinnati as well. He played with the Chargers these past couple of years. Pretty productive guy. I think he's not going to be too high or too low, but like Hunter Henry, you know what you're going to get for him. I think he could also be an option. I don't think Dalton Schultz is an option. I think
No.
he had to settle for a one-year deal with the Texans last year after being franchised by the Cowboys the year before. Maybe there's a chance that his market like completely craters again, but I just don't see that given how few options there are among this free agent tight end class. I really don't. There's just, if you're looking for a starting tight end who can actually do something in the passing game, there's just not a ton of other guys who are going to do that besides Dalton Schultz. So I would be surprised if his market kind of tanks like it did last year to a point where the Bengals would even feel comfortable entering that market.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Let's move on to offensive line. So first, let's talk about right tackle because that's the most glaring kind of spot that the Bengals have on the offensive line. Jonah Williams is a free agent. I don't think he's going to come back. I had him pretty high on our top 100 free agents list. I just think a guy like that who's played both sides of the line, who's a former first-round pick, who's been relatively consistent, is going to have a pretty big market. Cody Ford is a guy who could play right tackle in a pinch. He's also a free agent. So that leaves the Bengals with Deontay Smith, Jackson Carman, and Devin Cochran. Jay, I don't know about you. I think there are some guys out there who the Bengals could consider. Like, we don't think Jonah's going to come back. I would put Mike Nwano from the Patriots in the same realm as Jonah. I had him a little bit higher on our top 100 list. Going to be out of the price range. Tyron Smith from the Cowboys has pretty much been a left tackle. He's played a little right tackle. I think it's Cowboys or bust. I don't see him coming to somewhere like Cincinnati. Mekhi Becton from the Jets, a lot of upside, a lot of injuries, wants to play left tackle. I don't think he's coming here. Donovan Smith from the Chiefs, probably a left tackle. So I think you're looking at a group of guys who could play left tackle in a pinch, but who would be comfortable playing on the right. And I've got 4 guys who I think could be fits, Jay. Trent Brown from the Patriots.
I love it.
Okay. He's played left and right tackle. There's a lot of issues here. He's been injured. He's been up and down performance-wise. He's had some off-field stuff. There's a lot going on here. I do think he'll be cheap, though. He's getting older. I don't think there'll be a huge market for a guy who's kind of had these inconsistencies that he's had. But if you're looking for upside, I mean, this guy has played at an all-pro level at some points in his career. Like, no doubt about it, has been one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL at certain points in his career, if he can harness that again. Yosh Nijman from the Packers. He's a restricted free agent last year, full unrestricted free agent this year. He's been better at left tackle throughout his career, but he can play both sides. Still young, has experience. I think he'd be a good fit. Jermaine Illuminor from the Raiders. Been cheap these past 2 years. Been pretty good at right tackle, especially as a run blocker. You could do worse than Jermaine Illuminor if you want to find a low-cost option. Last guy, I've mentioned it before, George Fant. Played for the Texans last year. Played for a lot of teams in the NFL. Has played left and right. Cost the Texans $3 million and gave them, I would say, above average right tackle play on a playoff caliber team. I can't imagine, given his age, that he would cost much more than $3 or $5 million to come to the Bengals. That's just a guy you can plug in, and if he doesn't get hurt, you're looking at 16, 17 games of league average performance at right tackle for a marginal price. I think you'd have to be happy with that if you're the Bengals. So those are my 4 targets I would consider if I were running the Bengals.
Are George and Noah brothers? The Fants?
I don't think they're related.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say maybe the Bailey Double, and but I love the Trent Brown. I had him on my list. I mean, this is he was a 7th round pick, and he's carved out a 9-year career, a really good career in this league. He's got a Super Bowl ring. He won one with the Patriots. I think that's the kind of guy that I still think they take a tackle in the 1st or 2nd round, but you've already got Orlando Brown, you got Ted Karras, you got Kappa, you've got solid leaders in that room, but to have someone like directly at your position, like a Trent Brown, and I don't know all the details of the off the field stuff, but he's done something right to stick around this long as a 7th round pick. And I just think that would be a heck of a mentor to have, and even just to kind of let the rookie come along and not feel rushed to even if he's a 1st round pick, to have to get in there right away. And Trent Brown's 6'8", 370. I mean, he can make Orlando Brown look small. I mean, think of 2 6'8" bookends on that line. I think that would be great. Illuminor, I had him on my list last year. I really thought that he would be a guy they would go get. And you said it. He stayed with the Raiders for cheap. $3 million a year, or $3 million 1 year last year. I think that happens again. Everything we've heard out of Vegas is how much that team loves Antonio Pierce. And unless someone's going to go just pay huge money for Illuminor, I could see him coming back to the Raiders again. He played well again last year, and he's a guy like Trent Brown. He came into the league as a 5th round pick, only started 5 games, his first 5 games in first 5 years in the league. And now he started 31 games the last 2 years. It's gone on. He's gotten better as he's gotten older. I think he's still ascending. So he's the only one under 30 besides Jonah on the ones that are primarily right tackles. So I think both of those guys are good fits. I would probably lean towards Illuminor if they are both available. I'm not sure he will be. I think the Raiders are not going to let him get away.
And I think the last place on the offensive line is just like depth offensive line. So the other positions are kind of accounted for. But for depth purposes, we mentioned Cody Ford's going to be a free agent. Max Sharping is a free agent. So that kind of leaves Trey Hill as an interior guy. Was there anybody, Jay, who stood out to you who could maybe, if injuries, we've seen injuries struck on this offensive line in the past. are there guys who could maybe fill in, especially on that interior spot, that you think the Bengals could target?
Yeah, there are. But I think first things first, I think they bring back Ford for
Mm.
sure, and maybe probably Sharping. Um, but Dalton Reisner,
Mm.
again, he was with Riscotti in Denver and in Minnesota. 73 starts in 5 years, number 10 pass blocking grade in 2021, slipped to 19 this past year, but a guy with a lot of experience. Maybe he's going to want to go somewhere where he knows he's going to be a starter.
Yeah.
That's what you worry about here with something like that. But I don't think, despite his starting experience, I don't think he would be very expensive. And you bring him in, and who knows, maybe he beats out Cordell Volson, and Volson becomes a backup, and the offensive line is even better. Or if nothing else, they talk about all the time, the competition just brings out the best in all those guys. So his presence could make Cordell Volson better and really elevate his game in training camp. And then the one other guy, again, someone that just won a ring, Nick Allegretti. I mean, he's been with Kansas City forever, and he's been primarily a backup the entire time he's been there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's obviously okay in the backup role. Now he's got 3 rings. He's been with them since 19. Does he want to go somewhere and be a guaranteed starter, or would he be happy to go somewhere and just make some more money? He only made $2.5 million last year. I think he's affordable, but these guys, I don't know. I don't know how many are going to want to come and not be viewed as a starter right off the bat. And if you're going and getting veterans who are just backups, that it's kind of a crapshoot there anyhow. And
Yeah.
is that the best way to spend the money? I think this is the way to go, because again, that's a position, interior O line. They don't value a whole lot, and so I'm not sure how early they would target that in the draft. And I like Reisner a lot. I think he would be a great fit.
I'd Reisner on my list as well. I do wonder if he's going to want a starting job. I mean, he started almost the entire season
Mm.
last year, but he didn't sign with the Vikings till what, like a week or two into the season. So like the market was not there. He didn't
Yeah.
sign until September. Maybe that happens again where there's just no market for this guy. I had Allegretti on my list as well. I mean, he played the entire second half of the Super Bowl with a torn UCL. I mean,
Yes.
that's pretty amazing. I had like my binoculars at the game, like I was really focusing on interior offensive line play. He played pretty well. He got a lot of help on the interior against Hargrave and those guys, but I thought he did pretty well. He's not, Joe Tooney at left tackle,
Right.
obviously, but for what he was asked to do, I thought he did really well. So I had 3 other guys besides Allegretti. Isaiah Wynn, who played for the Dolphins last year. He played for the former first-round pick of the Patriots. Can play tackle, can play guard. He was supposed to be the starting guard in Miami this year. A lot of injury issues throughout his career, so I think that'll depress his market. Charlie Heck was an offensive tackle for the Texans. He played in that Bobby Slowick offense. I think there's some similarities there with what the Bengals want to do. Younger guy. I don't think he's a guy you're looking at as a starter. He'd be purely a depth piece. One guy I think that could be really good on the interior for cheap is David Edwards. He used to play for the Rams, so he knows that Rams style. He spent last year in Buffalo purely as a backup, so I think he'd be okay playing again as a backup. Spent some time at tackle, primarily a guard. I think he'd be a really solid interior depth piece. And like you mentioned with Reisner, no thought that he maybe could not beat out Cordell Volson. I don't think Volson is necessarily locked into a starting job next year. I think if the Bengals don't find someone who could be an improvement, they'd be fine with him starting again. But if there's an option to add some sort of potential upgrade, I think the Bengals will take it. I really do. I don't think that Volson is like locked into a starting job.
Hey, one other guy, just for versatility reasons, for money reasons, he only made $2.3 million last year. He's been a starter the last 3 years, and he started at guard and center. It's Evan Brown from Seattle.
Sure.
And I know it's offense defense, but he was with the Giants in 2018. So at least Lou Anarumo has some sort of working knowledge of this guy. And he's another one that he's worked his way up to become a starter. He wasn't a starter early in his career. So, now that he's there, is he going to want to stay there? Yeah, I mean, he would be an ideal one just because of that. Because right now, I have no confidence in Trey Hill. If anything happens to Ted Karras, you're probably talking about Sharping's going to be your backup center, but he's a free agent. There's no guarantee he's back anyhow. So I think Evan Brown could be an interesting piece there too.
It's going to be an interesting offseason, I think. We're at this spot again where, there are some spots on the Bengals roster that need help, specifically right tackle. I think on offense is the big one, but that's really the only glaring gap, I would say. You could maybe say, tight end, but I think we're comfortable knowing that the Bengals are going to bring back some of these options and they don't necessarily
Mhm.
value this position as well. Running back, they've got Chase Brown. We think they're going to add somebody. I think right tackle is like the obvious position where if the Bengals are going to spend some real money in free agency on offense, I think you'd have to say it's going to be a right tackle. I think that was a good discussion. Next week we'll go over the defense, where I think there are some obvious areas where money could be spent on
Yes.
that side of the ball, and some really, I would say, higher profile names that maybe the Bengals could consider on that defensive side of the ball. So we'll get into all that next week. A couple more things we want to talk here is Super Bowl. I was at the Super Bowl this past week, my first ever Super Bowl. Incredible experience to see Mahomes in person. Just come back. In the stadium, it never felt like a doubt. I will say, like I never doubted that Patrick Mahomes was going to find a way to win this game. I felt that way going in. So maybe I was just confirming my priors, but he just has a way. And I kind of want to talk about that, Jay. Like, what is it going to take to beat this Chiefs team? I mean, this year we saw the Chiefs not have a wide receiver one, right? They've had issues on offense all season long, and yet the Chiefs defense steps up all season long and develops all these young players. And Steve Spagnuolo is again creating these excellent game plans. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes, like we said, just finds a way. When it's crunch time, he finds a way. It's got to be tough for every team around the NFL to watch this and just say, how are we ever going to break through? Especially for a team like the Bengals that has broken through this Chiefs kind of stranglehold at one point, and then the following year kind of gotten beaten back down by this same team. I mean, what are your thoughts, Jay? I mean, where are the Bengals going to have to do? Like, is it something specific in free agency or the draft, or is it just the playoffs are a crapshoot and just hope they get lucky and hope they consistently keep building these teams that get into the playoffs, and hopefully one of these days they'll be able to make it all the way through?
Just keep Joe Burrow healthy. I mean, he's 3-1 against Patrick Mahomes. It's unreal. And that one loss, of course, everybody knows. Last second field goal, ill-advised penalty by Osai. They didn't play that well in that game anyhow. They were still right there and almost won it on the road. I think that's where it starts. You got a healthy Joe Burrow, you've got a shot against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I went and I looked at the first four quarterbacks drafted in 2020. And what is their record against quarterbacks who have Super Bowl rings?
Hmm.
So Burrow, 8-4, including the 3-1 against Mahomes. Tua, 2-5. Herbert, 5-9. Jalen Hurts, 1-6. I mean,
Wow.
Burrow can beat anybody. And you keep that guy healthy, you keep this offense, you keep Jamar Chase, you're going to have Higgins this year. I don't think they're that far away at all. And it kind of shows on the betting odds. They're right back up there. I think they had the fifth best. They by far the best odds of any team that didn't make the playoffs. I think Burrow was third for the MVP voting, and then I saw a new one that came out today. He was tied for second. I think that's where it starts and ends. You keep that guy healthy, everything else will be fine. I expect the defense to take another step. I expect the Kansas City defense to take another step. That's a young group, and it's as talented as you can want. But who knows? Chris Jones leaves. I mean, you take one big piece out of that middle, it can change some things. But I don't. It sounds crazy to say because they've won 3 in 5 years and 2 in a row, and I don't think that the Chiefs are that much above the Bengals. The Bengals got work to do, obviously, but it's not like there's a whole bunch of work to do to
Right.
get caught up to even and then take your chances in the playoffs. I think they're pretty close to even right now.
Yeah, and for the Chiefs. It's not just Chris Jones. L'Jarius Sneed at corner is a free
Yeah.
agent. He was one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. Willie Gay and Drew Tranquil at linebacker are free agents. So they are losing pieces as well. It's not like they're going to be able to bring back this exact same roster. On the other hand, they could maybe go out and find a real wide receiver this offseason. So there's work that they could do on that side too. So it will be interesting. Jay, one other thing from the Super Bowl I had to get your take on, because I know you're as into like the strategy and kind of mind games and game calling as I am on this stuff. So this is the first NFL playoff game that we've had since the NFL changed their overtime rules to allow each team to at least have one possession. So the 49ers decided to receive the ball first in the Super Bowl. The highly debated topic. some of the 49ers players said they weren't even aware of these new rules, like until, they showed it on the scoreboard in the stadium. There's been a lot of debate on whether, okay, should you take the ball in that situation and know that if both teams match scores, that you're going to be able to have that third possession in a sudden death situation? Or should you kick the ball off so that you receive the ball second and you have the informational advantage, right? You know what you have to match or what you have to exceed. And that's kind of a more of a college overtime view of the
Mm.
situation. I know where I stand on this. I do think it's very close, but I had to get your thoughts on this, Jay. If you were Kyle Shanahan in this situation, what would you have done?
I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. I just know when they passed this rule, I asked Zach Taylor about it. I was like,
Hmm.
what do you think you guys would do? And he said it's a great question because there's just no data there.
Yeah.
The analytics aren't built yet. You have nothing to compare to. I think anybody playing for that third possession is crazy because the only way that comes into play is if it's punt or field goal. Like the Chiefs said, if they go second and they score a touchdown, they're going for two. You'd be insane not to go for two. If you just kick an extra point tied up, then you got to get a stop and a score.
Yeah.
Just go
It's
for two.
it's 2 yards to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like, no question.
And if I think if that was the position they were in, I think that game-winning touchdown, the Super Bowl winning touchdown, I think that would have been their 2-point play.
Yes.
And they would have done something else to get the touchdown. I just what I thought about instantly was because it goes back to one of the most favorite games I've ever watched in my life. I said it earlier, I'm an Ohio State fan. When Ohio State beat Miami in double overtime, Miami thought they had that game won. They're throwing helmets, running on the field. Here comes the late flag for pass interference, which was the right call. No Ohio State hater is going to tell me that was not the right call. It was more holding than it was pass interference, but it was definitely a foul. The 49ers didn't know. If the 49ers had scored on that third down and got a touchdown, would they have come running off the bench, throwing helmets and celebrating, and then getting
Some of them, I think, yeah. Some of them
and then
would
you
have,
get a
yeah.
15-yard penalty and you're kicking off. I mean, it would have been a crazy, insane scene had that happened. I think it's a little overblown that they didn't. I mean, I forgot. I won't say I didn't know because, like I said, I asked Zach Taylor about it as soon as it happened. But then they put it up there. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot the playoff rules. Now both teams
Mhm.
get a possession regardless. So even as someone that covers the lead and has asked questions about this exact rule, I still had forgotten it. Um, I don't know if I was Kyle what I would have done. If it's a shootout, then obviously you want to go second because you figure it's going to be touchdown. There's only 2 touchdowns in that whole game, right? Or 3? There were not a lot of touchdowns until we got to overtime. So maybe it makes sense to play to get the ball and just try to go force the hand. But I just I don't know what I would have done in that situation. And I think it's crazy to grill Kyle because it's one of those things where there's just no data to base it on. And
Yeah.
if you win the game, you made the right call. If you lose the game, you made the wrong call. It's not you can't have it both ways. I will go back to what we talked about after the championship games. I was defending Dan Campbell, and everyone was grilling him. I didn't hear everyone grilling Kyle Shanahan when he went
No.
for it on fourth
No.
down for 3, and they end up scoring a touchdown and taking the lead. So
Yeah, because they
uh,
made it.
right, exactly.
Because there's no discussion of it.
It's
Yeah.
it's about outcome. It's not about
Yeah.
decisions. So,
Exactly.
and that's kind of the same way here, where I don't think I think it's a feel thing, and
Yeah.
knowing your team, and the variable that everybody forgets, and that Kyle Shanahan has talked about is Mahomes had just marched right down the field. And that their defense was tired, so
Yeah.
that makes sense too. You got to take that into consideration. But I do think it was a bad look for his players to sound that confused. That should have been
Yeah.
addressed beforehand.
Yeah, I actually asked Kyle Shanahan after the game if the defense being tired had factored into his decision, and right after the game, he said no. But
Mm.
since then, I've seen John Lynch and Shanahan's kind of admit that it did play into the role. So maybe he just didn't
Damage
want to say
control.
that. He just didn't want to
Yes.
say that at the time, or yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I think like the fact that we're even all having this discussion kind of proves that the NFL has hit on like the perfect solution for a playoff overtime, right? Because
Mhm.
like if we're even having this discussion and everyone's kind of viewing it as 50-50, they probably hit on a good idea here, right?
Mhm.
It's giving you the choice. And I think it's very, very close, like basically 51-49, what I would have done. But I think I would have absolutely kicked off, especially when you're facing someone like Patrick Mahomes. I don't think you want to give Patrick Mahomes a target. If you're letting Patrick Mahomes go out there and say you need one drive to win the Super Bowl, I think he's going to go down and score. And that's what happened. Against other quarterbacks, I could see wanting to go out there and get points on the board and then think you can hold them. But against Patrick Mahomes, I would just never do that. And then what you're talking about is right, that it's a bad look. Even if, a defensive player isn't going to be like, oh, I'm going to go play harder now because I know the overtime rules. But I think you still want to be made aware of this. And it's not great when, Chris Jones is saying that Andy Reid has talked to the Chiefs players about these new rules as far back as training camp and has drilled down exactly on what they're going to do, and that we are going to be going for two if so one of these teams had a plan and one of these teams, it seems like, didn't have much of a plan. And you don't necessarily think a Super Bowl is going to come down to an overtime decision and this stuff, but you've gone through this whole season preparing for like every little outcome. You would think that would come up. And there was some other stuff in this game too. I know I always harp on like Kyle Shanahan's game management, but at the end of the first half, they just let the Chiefs like run the clock all the way down before they kicked a field goal. They had basically all their timeouts. They could have gotten another chance at the end of half to at least get a field goal with Jake Moody, who's proven he can hit these long kicks. Like, I thought that was ridiculous. I just don't understand these head coaches who spend every waking moment going over every little detail. And then when it comes to these big in-game situations that really do kind of swing the win probability meter, it's like they've put no thought into it whatsoever. And it's crazy to me. I can't imagine that. I think Kyle Shanahan's number one goal this offseason is hire a game management consultant. Like, that is what he has to do. I didn't understand that at all.
So I think what happened there was, had that been goal to go situation, I think they would have used their timeouts. But if I remember right, Kansas City could have got a first down at like the 2-yard line.
They could have, yeah.
Then you're helping them extend their drive if they get that. So maybe that played into it a little bit. But you're right. I remember Zach Taylor did that in his very first game as coach in Seattle, where the Seahawks had the ball and they were going in, and he's calling timeouts. And it's like, you understood why he was doing it. It was like, we've never seen this before. This is not the way Marvin operated. And it's just kind of the way the game has gone now, is where teams are like, hey, the 13 seconds with the Chiefs and Bills. Everybody's like, if we can leave ourselves some sort of time on the clock, maybe we can do something. And going back to the kickoff or receive debate, that the one other thing that I think you make life easier on yourself if you go second, because if you go first, like Kyle had to face it. The third down's incomplete. Do you kick the field goal or do you go for the touchdown? If the other team goes first and they score a touchdown, you're going for it on fourth down every single time. You have to. So it takes that element out of it as well, where you've got four plays to get a first down every time you move the chains.
I mean, the Chiefs had the 4th and 1. If they had gone first, what would they have done? Are they going to go for it on a 4th and 1 from their own 30-yard line and just give them a free field goal to win the game? No, I think they would have probably punted. So I think that's an excellent point too. You're changing the dynamics of when and how to go for it in these situations like that. That's an excellent point. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs win their 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years. It's, a dynasty, a mini dynasty, whatever you want to call it. It's an amazing accomplishment. And until further notice, they are the team to knock off in the entire Super Bowl. There's no doubt about that. Jay, last thing we're going to talk about before we wrap up is our bets. Let's just quickly go over our bets from last week. Our final bets, I guess, for actual game action. We'll come up with some creative bets as the offseason goes along to keep up our betting. But you want to quickly recap our bets for the Super Bowl?
So I was at minus 14 units and you were at minus 20 units going into the Super Bowl. It came down to overtime, just like the Super Bowl. I had that the team that won the coin toss will not win the game. If San Francisco wins that game, I go 3-2 in the Super Bowl, you go 3-2 in the Super Bowl, and I win the season series. The Chiefs won. I lost that bet. So I went 2-3. You went 3-2. I finished minus 24. You finished minus 10. You win the season championship. So
wow.
Well done. It came down. It was just like the Super Bowl. It came down to the very end. I will say this is amazing. Okay, so you had Pacheco over 65.5 rushing yards. He had 59. You came up just short there. You had Valdez-Scantling over 19.5 receiving yards. He had 20.
Got it.
You got a half yard. Otherwise, I win. Not bitter at all. You had Kansas City first to score. That didn't hit. You took – wait a minute. Yes, you took the under.
Yep.
47 and a half. It was 47, another half point that you won it by. And then I guess I didn't look. You took Chiefs money line, so that would pay more than even money. So you actually
Yeah.
won by even more than I said. But you won 3, you lost 2. In addition to the coin toss wins the game, I lost that. I had Debo over 78 and a half scrimmage yards. Didn't get that. The one I thought was a lock, TD jersey totals over 121 and a half. It was only 61. It was all these. Christian McCaffrey at 23 was the highest scoring touchdown guy. So, and there weren't a lot of touchdowns anyhow. The ones I won, Mahomes over 1/2 interception and under total points in the first quarter, 7.5. I wrote an article about Super Bowl records I expected to be broken in this one, and I said longest field goal in Super Bowl history. The over-under was 46 and a half. The longest field goal was 57. Now, when the record got set twice in that game.
Yeah, it broke it twice. Yeah.
I should have picked that one instead of the stupid coin toss one. But I didn't, and I lost. So congratulations to you on winning the season series.
It's a game of inches. That's all I'll say. I can't believe it. I don't feel like I've earned it, but I will take it. If the numbers say I won, I'll accept it. That's all I can say. Yeah, so that's it for today's episode. Again, thanks to everyone for following along all season. It's been a great season. I can't believe that the games are finally over. It seems like just the other day, Jay, that we were talking about the preseason and Trevor Siemian versus Jake Browning back in preseason games. I can't believe we're actually here to the end of the season, but we're not going anywhere. We've got the combine coming right up and the franchise tag deadline and free agency and the draft and all the good offseason stuff. So we will be here every single week talking Bengals for you. Make sure you give us a like, a rating, a review, a subscribe, all the good stuff. And we will talk to you next week.